Hello, I am R.E. Burden. Welcome to my show, R.E. Burden Presents Deep Dives into the Divine Design. Today's topic, Day 7, the Day of the Almighty Creator's Rest. Foreshadowing the day of the appearance of the New Jerusalem, Yeruwshawlyim.
That's kind of what we're aiming for today. What if those foundational stories we all know are just packed with this incredible design, but it's been, well, obscured by time, language barriers, tradition?
Yeah, our mission here in this deep dive is really to explore that divine design within Scripture. And key to that is intentionally removing those filters you mentioned.
Filters like?
Well, the linguistic stuff that gets lost in translation, or the cultural contexts that aren't obvious to us today, and definitely the weight of traditional interpretations. We want to try and get closer to the original brilliance, if that makes sense.
It does. And our guide for this, our source material, is a document called Day 7, the Day of the Almighty Creator's Rest.
Right.
It takes a really close look at the seventh day, Shabbath, and makes some, well, pretty fascinating connections to the bigger idea of a new creation.
And that's where it gets exciting, I think. There's potential here for real aha moments for you, the listener. By looking closely at some of these often overlooked bits, hopefully you'll get a fresher perspective, a richer understanding, like seeing an old painting with new eyes.
Okay, so let's dive in, starting at the beginning. Day 7, Shabbath, in the original creation story. Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 to 3. It talks about completion, the Creator's rest, and this special favor, the consecration of the seventh day.
But what's interesting right away, and the source picks up on this, is how does the seventh day actually relate to the first six?
You mean the pattern? The
The-
3 days of arrangement and 3 days of adornment.
Exactly that. How does Shabbath fit? It doesn't immediately seem to follow that same kind of structure. It feels distinct.
Right, and this is where we need to kind of peel back a layer and look at the original language, yeah. The source brings up this Hebrew grammar point, the consecutive wa, or vav consecutive. Can you break that down for us simply?
Sure. Think of it almost like a storyteller saying, and then, or so then, to link events together in sequence.
Okay.
In Hebrew narrative, this specific grammatical form, the consecutive wa, often does that. It shows things happening one after another. Understanding that helps us see the flow, the connection between the parts of the creation account.
So it's about sequence.
It's primarily about sequence and narrative, yeah. And while, people discuss its implications elsewhere, for our purpose today, it helps see how the story unfolds day by day, leading up to and including the seventh.
The source also mentions something called the cyclical Hebrew narrative style. That sounds interesting. How does that connect Shabbath to the rest?
Well, this is the idea that sometimes the narrative will circle back. It revisits earlier themes or details near the end of a section.
Like in Genesis 2, verses 4 to 6.
Precisely. The text there touches on elements from the earlier creation days. The source suggests this isn't just like repetition for its own sake. It's a literary way to show that Shabbath isn't just tacked on, it's deeply connected, maybe even the intended completion of that whole 6-day process, like the final necessary stroke that makes the painting whole.
Okay, this next part is where I was a bit surprised. The source calls Shabbath a feast day and connects it to taste, the tongue, and even touch, the skin. That's not an immediate connection I'd make.
No, it's not obvious. And that's kind of the point, pushing beyond just seeing Shabbath as, well, stopping work.
Right.
Thinking of it as a feast implies enjoyment, doesn't it? Celebration, savoring what's been done. By linking it to taste and touch, the source is hinting at a more sensory, experiential quality to the Creator's rest and the finished creation, almost like it's meant to be felt, appreciated tangibly.
Oh, okay. And then adding another layer entirely, the source brings in the Roman Republic calendar, the RRC, and this idea of calends, the new moon day.
Right.
Why look at an old Roman calendar?
It's about understanding how time itself has been structured differently. The RRC was lunar-based, and apparently it had this rule. Saturday, their seventh day, couldn't land on calends, the first of the month.
Go.
The source contrasts this with the modern Jewish calendar, suggesting there was a historical shift. maybe influences from Constantine Hillel II, aligning things more with the Julian, the solar calendar.
So the way we even track the week might have traditional overlays?
Exactly. It just reminds us that even our week, our Sabbath observance, it's been shaped by history and culture. It underscores why we're trying to look past some traditions to grasp potential original meanings. It's part of removing those filters.
Got it. Okay, so that gives us a much richer picture of Shabbath in the Old Creation. Now let's pivot to the New Creation. The source uses a passage from Revelation 21 talking about a new Yeruwshawlyim. What's the essence of that vision?
The core idea is total renewal, complete transformation, the Almighty Creator making all things new.
Right.
It's this picture of God dwelling with humanity directly, and crucially, the end of all suffering. No more death, no crying, no pain. It's ultimate restoration, perfect harmony, really echoing that initial creation ideal.
And the source makes a really bold connection, linking the Messiah's birth to the anniversary of the Old Creation. That feels very intentional.
It does. The argument is that there's a pattern here, a type and shadow relationship running through the New Testament, the B'rith Hadesha.
Okay.
So the Messiah's arrival isn't random. It's framed as the very dawn of this new creation, mirroring the first creation, which fits perfectly with this whole idea we're exploring, seeing the underlying divine design across all of Scripture.
This then leads into the proposed New Creation Days framework from the source. Can you walk us through that sequence?
Yeah, it's quite something. The source lays out a 7-stage progression for the new creation, mirroring the old creation's 7 days.
Okay, what are they?
So day 0 is the Messiah's birth. Day 1, his death. Day 2, the burial. Day 3, resurrection. Day 4 is Pentecost. Day 5, the second coming. Day 6, the Great White Throne Judgment. And finally, Day 7 is the New Yeruwshawlyim itself.
Wow, so not literal days, necessarily?
Not necessarily 24-hour days, no. More like a symbolic 7-part structure mapping out God's redemptive work, echoing his original creative work. It's about seeing that consistent pattern, that design.
And to help grasp this grand design, the source uses these 5 sensory metaphors: touch, sight, hearing, smell, taste. How do they fit in?
The idea, as I understand it, is that these senses offer different ways to perceive or appreciate the unfolding story, both old and new creations.
With different lenses.
Exactly. Just like our physical senses help us experience the world, these metaphorical senses might help us grasp the spiritual, the theological dimensions more fully. The source even has a visual trying to link specific senses to specific days or stages in both creation accounts. It aims for a more holistic view.
Now, the source gets quite personal. It shares a story about the author's own faith journey, inspired by Charles Finney's prayer journal. What stood out to you there?
Well, it really highlights the power of intentional prayer and actually seeing answers. Finney apparently kept detailed records, requests made, outcomes noted. And this practice seemed to really bolster the author during a tough time. It speaks to that idea of actively engaging with the creator, trusting in his response. That theme feels woven into both creation and recreation.
And the author gives specific examples: praying for a house for their mother, completing studies at Liberty University, and seeing those things happen. Why include such personal details in this kind of theological deep dive?
I think it grounds it. It connects these big, maybe abstract theological ideas to real life.
Right.
It suggests the divine design isn't just theory. It's meant to intersect with our actual lives, our needs, our hopes. Sharing those answered prayers is like an invitation, isn't it? For you, the listener, to consider that same possibility of connection and restoration in your own story, aligning your narrative with the bigger one.
That leads nicely into the final prayer mentioned in the source, one for morning Shabbath devotions. What are the key requests in that prayer?
That prayer is very focused on seeking spiritual senses, you could say. It asks for wisdom, understanding, counsel, might, knowledge, the fear of the Almighty Creator. Basically, a desire to perceive him better and serve him in a way that pleases him.
Okay.
And it also includes this really moving prayer for peace starting locally, like Jerusalem, Judea, Shamron, but extending out to the whole world. It connects that personal devotion to a global concern.
And it ends with this desire for the listener to experience complete and total restoration. That really brings it full circle, doesn't it? Back to the themes of the perfect original creation and the promised new one.
Absolutely. It's that longing for wholeness, for renewal that both narratives point towards. Restoring relationships, purpose, peace. Echoing that original Shabbath rest and looking ahead to the ultimate rest in the New Yeruwshawlyim.
So as we sort of wrap up this deep dive, we've journeyed from the old creation Shabbath all the way to the vision of the new creation. And the whole time, we've been trying to peel back those layers,
Hmm.
language, culture, tradition.
Right, trying to get a clearer glimpse of that intentional divine design underneath. By looking at the nuances, the structure, the context, the hope is to see some of those perhaps less obvious but really meaningful connections.
Okay, so here's something for you, the listener, to chew on after we finish. How might understanding this deep connection, this echo between old creation Shabbath and the new creation story, change how you see your own place in it all?
Yeah, and what filters, maybe unconscious ones, might you need to examine in your own life or in how you read these familiar stories, just to see that divine design maybe a bit more clearly?
It really is an invitation, isn't it? To
Yeah.
revisit those texts with this kind of lens, maybe seek out those connections for yourself.
Definitely. And the source itself, as you mentioned, lists other related books, things like 16 Days to Triumph, the Messiah-centered calendar. It could be helpful resources if this sparks something and you want to explore more.